Hi, I'm Sean McVeigh with Sean's Outdoor Adventures, and in this video I'm going to go over how to tune a Hoyt compound bow. A few months ago I did a video that I just called How to Tune a Compound Bow, but I did that one using primarily a Bowtech, and since Hoyts are a little bit different, I wanted to do a video specifically for Hoyts. So the first thing I do when I'm tuning a Hoyt is I tighten the limb bolts down as far as they can go so the bow's at its peak weight. The next thing I do is I check for cam lean. I will look right down the bowstring from the top cam down to the bottom one. Now, if we're going to have cam lean with a Hoyt, we're generally going to see it with the top cam because of the bus cable has a yoke system to it. The bottom cam simply has the bowstring and the cable going to it, so you don't normally see cam lean on that. You'll see it up here. So I'm going to look for cam lean. If I see that the cam is leaning, I'm going to add twist. Now before I explain that, let me just say that if you'll notice, the cables are on this side of the bow. And so when you look at this yoke system, the yoke on this side has farther to travel to get to the top limb. So what you're basically going to need to do is add twist to this side of the yoke just in general. In fact, if you look at this real closely, you'll see that there's a fair amount of twist in this side of the yoke and virtually none at all in the other. And that is in order to keep the cam perfectly vertical. Now, if my cam was leaning to one side or the other, perhaps maybe my cable just stretched a little bit, I would look at which direction it was going, and I would basically, the way I kind of think of it is these yokes are almost like each arm, and each arm's holding one of those top limbs. So if the cam is leaning to this side, that means I kind of need to pull down harder on that limb to bring that cam back into alignment. So I'm going to add twist to that side of the yoke. And you know, in some situations, if you look it over, you might want to just take a twist out of this side of the yoke, if you know, depending on which way your cam is leaning. So once I get my cam lean straightened out, which in this case it's perfect, I'm going to take a tape measure and measure the tiller. So I'll take a tape measure. I usually just hook it right onto the metal part of the limb pocket here, and I measure over to the string. Now, one thing I like to do is make sure I'm measuring to the same distance on the bowstring on each end. So you might even want to measure that distance and put a mark there with a little like gray marker or something, just to make sure you're measuring your tiller at the same distance on each end of the bow. So I'd look at the top and I look at the bottom, and if that's on, which it is, I'm ready to move on. The next thing I like to do is check my draw stop timing. To do that, I use a draw table, which I have one right here behind me that I've made. I've mounted this hook on the table, and I have a boat winch here that I got at a boat store for like $20. It's rated up to like 600 pounds. And then you just need a cord that's rated up to, you know, like 100 pounds. And you check your draw stop timing. This is the way I like to do it, and it's a fairly inexpensive thing to build if you don't have one already. You can also have, you know, draw your bow back and have someone look at your draw stops for you. But in order for your bow to perform at its peak performance, you really want your draw stops to be hitting at the same time. So as you can see, in this situation, the draw stop for the top cam is not coming in contact with the cable. If I pan up and look at the draw stop for the bottom cam, we'll see that it is in contact with the cable. This means I need to make an adjustment. So in this situation, my top cam was under rotating, which means the draw stop was not coming in contact with the cable as early as the one on the bottom cam. Now I was at peak weight. I have my limb bolts tightened down all the way, and my bow scale read 70.8 pounds, which is a little bit above the design of this bow. The peak weight of this bow is supposed to be 70 pounds. Since it's above that, it helps me realize that something is off. And since my draw stop timing is off, that that leads me to conclude that I'm going to make my adjustment using the bus cable. The way I like to think of the bus cable is two arms holding this limb here. If the bow, the peak weight of the bow is too high, that means these two arms are pulling down too hard on the top limb. And this is a way to impact your draw weight. So if I was to put twist into the bus cable to draw this down even more, I'm going to increase my peak weight. If I take twist out of that cable, I'm going to decrease my peak weight. In this situation, my top cam is under rotating. In order to correct that, I naturally need to take a little bit of twist out of the bus cable. So this is perfect. This helps me realize that, okay, if I take some twist out of my bus cable, I'm going to reduce my peak weight, try to get it right close to 70, and I'm also going to help this rotate around. So the next thing I want to do is put my bow in an approved bow press, which I have. You don't want to do this type of work on, like a makeshift bow press, like one of those portable ones, because you can void your warranty. You have to use a bow press that is approved by Hoyt in order to not void your warranty. So I'm going to put this in a bow press, and I'm going to take a half twist out of my bus cable.
The other option would be to put a half twist into the control cable instead, which is the cable connected to both cams. This would increase the draw weight instead of decrease it, which would be preferred if the bow was reading 69 pounds at peak weight. Also, if the bottom cam is under rotating instead of the top cam, you'd do the opposite. You'd put twist into the bus cable, which is the cable with the yoke connected to the top limb, or take twist out of the control cable, which is the cable connected to both cams. Please note that these adjustments will have a small impact on the draw length as well.
I'm just going to take a half of a twist out. So I take it off of the cam like this, and in order to take a half a twist out, I'm going, for my particular one, I have to twist up like this, and then I'm going to reform the end of the cable for going back onto the cam and put it right back on, making sure that all the cables and string are seated in their proper groove. And I will check that again when I get the bow press down.
After making this adjustment, the peak draw weight went from 70.8 pounds to 70.4 pounds. Okay, I've taken a half twist out of my bus cable, and as you can see, the draw stop for the top cam is still a little bit under rotating. So I'm going to go ahead and take another half twist out of the bus cable.
So I've taken another half twist out of my bus cable, and as you can see, my draw stop timing is now where I want it to be.
This time the draw weight went from 70.4 pounds down to 70.2 pounds.
The next thing I do is lower the poundage of my bow to my desired weight. For me, I like to shoot it right around 65 pounds. So I'll loosen the limb bolts by about 2.5 turns each. Then I will measure my tiller again, and I'll also put the bow back on the draw table to check my draw stop timing. I just did both of those, and when I measured the tiller, at first glance I thought it was on. Then I put it on the draw stop table, and my top cam was slightly under rotated, just a hair. And so I lowered it back down and I measured the tiller again more carefully. Now in the United States, most tape measures, which I used, are, our measurements are in inches and fractions of inches, whereas, in the rest of the world they use centimeters, which, is a little bit easier. But when we talk about the tape measure, the smallest increment on the tape measure is a 1/16 of an inch, well, on most, and which mine is a 1/16 of an inch. And when I remeasured it and looked at it, I was half of that. I was a 32nd of an inch different. So I loosened the limb bolt by a quarter of a turn, remeasured it, and it was right on. And then I put it back on the draw table, and my draw stops were perfect. As you can see here, the bottom draw stop is in contact with the string, and as I pan up, the top draw stop is in contact with the string. I'm mentioning all that because every little thing makes a difference. If you're loosening the limb bolts, and I've been in pro shops where I've watched people, loosen the limb bolts and hand people their bow, or they'll put it on the scale and they'll say, okay, it's set at the weight you want, good luck. Even like a quarter of a turn, like when you're loosening those and you're loosening this side, you can be getting the desired draw weight that you want, but you can be throwing off certain elements of the timing of the bow. In this case, I was a quarter of a turn off actually on my top limb bolt, and that threw off the draw stop timing just by a hair. Now, if I was shooting the bow, I wouldn't even recognize it. But if we want our bows to perform at their peak optimum possible performance, we want everything to be in tune as best as possible. I will also say that the top tiller measurement was shorter than the bottom tiller measurement. Therefore, I needed to loosen that limb bolt in order to increase the tiller measurement by just a little bit. Here I have a different Hoyt than I was just holding and working on. This one, I want to change if you look at the direction of the peep sight from straight on, the loop and the peep sight, I always tie my loops in the same direction as my peep sights, so that when you pull on when you hook onto the loop with your release, you can see it pulls my peep sight in line. So I could leave this like that and just, every time I clip it on, rotate, the string like this, and maybe do a faint twist with my fingers. But I could also, if I want to, I could try putting a half twist in the string to bring the peep sight around. Now it's possible it might bring the peep sight right past where I need it to be, and then it's the same angle in the other direction. But I can I can put it on the bow press and give it a try and see what happens, and we'll also see what difference it makes in the draw weight. So I have my bow pressed. I'm going to take the string off of the top cam, and I'm careful to watch how I'm bringing this off. And in this situation, so I have it off like this, I wanted to put a half turn to bring that peep sight around. So I twist up and reform the bowstring, and then I'll put it back onto that cam. As you can see, the peep is now faced almost perfectly straight back, and there's my loop. So that half of a turn to the bowstring made a difference. So by putting a half twist into the string, we decreased the draw weight by 1/10 of a pound. In general, anytime you're adding twist to the string, you're going to decrease your draw weight. The next thing I usually do is get my rest and everything else in place. So I usually use levels. I have these that I've purchased. This one goes on the string back here. I usually set the bow up. I don't like free hold it like I am right now, but I'll set it up so that it's in a steady vise, and then I'll check to see where the levels are. For me, with my long draw length, a lot of times in order to get perfect arrow flight, my knock point will have to be a hair high. Everyone is different, and it also depends on the bow. Some bows you'll need that, some bows you will not. Another important thing that is crucial in order to check that is you have to have a properly spined arrow for your draw weight and draw length. So I used to, a while back, have trouble tuning my bow, and the reason was because my arrows were not spined properly. Although I was shooting the arrows that were prescribed for my draw weight and draw length, I have a 31-inch draw, and even though I was shooting the arrows that were prescribed for that particular bow, it was when I was shooting a Bowtech. The cams are much more radical, and so the spine of the arrow actually wasn't working. So I had to go to a heavier spined arrow. I actually had to shoot an arrow that was rated from 75 to 95 pounds. And then I was getting great arrow flight. But so anyway, the reason I mention that is you have to have a properly spined arrow. And then, you know, I get it close and then I shoot it through paper. That's what I like to do. And if the vertical alignment of your nock or your rest is off, you're going to have to make an adjustment. Of course, it's easier to adjust your rest than it is for you to move your D-loop up and down. So here's what you do. If you're shooting through paper, and let me also mention this, I always make sure I shoot a sight on with a level, because if you cant the bow in any way, it's going to change and throw off your paper tuning if you're shooting with your hands and not like some kind of a machine. Also, since I'm mentioning that, I always double check my sight with an actual level. Let me see if I have one. I have one here. I have a level. Now the inside of this sight is perfectly straight up and down for going on the bow. So I'll put the level on that without even having it on the bow to see if the level in my level coincides with what's on here. And there's been plenty of times where I've actually had to adjust the level on my sight in order for it to be level. So you're going to want that to be on for this part of the tuning. So now we're talking about shooting through paper. This level has to be on, and when you're shooting through the paper, you have to make sure your bow is level. If you have a stabilizer, you know, that you're going to shoot on the bow, now's a good time to put it on. Let me just put this one on here real quick. So that's going to help you hold the bow level when you're shooting through paper. So what I do, and I'm sorry I'm adding all this detail in, but I think it's important for you to know. So you're shooting through paper, and we're worried about if our nock point's on. If the point of your arrow is going through the paper higher than your fletching, that generally means you're going to have to lower your rest to bring the point back in line. And normally what I do when I'm paper tuning is I'll shoot from like 3 to 6 feet away and until I can get a bullet hole, and then I'll move back to like 10 to 15 feet and shoot again, and then back to 30 feet and shoot again. And I'm going to do that until I can fine-tune my rest and until I have shooting good bullet holes at each distance. And again, you're going to do the same thing from your right to left. The nice thing about these Hoyts is there's a little groove here down the back of the riser. I usually eyeball the string with that groove, and I look right down at the arrow rest, and I can see from doing this that the arrow rest needs to come out a little bit. As I talked about in my other video on tips on how to tune a compound bow, another thing you can do is, depending on the type of bow, now with this Hoyt, it has a little bit of an offset for the stabilizer. Some bows, the stabilizer is right in the middle, so you can eyeball it from the limb bolt down to the top limb bolt down to the bottom limb bolt and just see where your stabilizer is and where your arrow is in relation to that. Another thing I sometimes do is I tape a string from the middle of the limb bolt and I run it down to this limb bolt. And I personally, what I've done, let's see if I can find it here now I'm talking, is I have cut down an arrow that I can just clip onto the string here and put it on. And when I have that string on there, it goes right down the front of the arrow, and I could see, looking at the string, I could see if my arrow needs to come in or out. So in this situation, like I said, I can see that the rest needs to come out, and then I'll paper tune it. Generally speaking, when you're paper tuning, if the whichever direction the point often is in relation to the fletchings, you're going to have to move the point toward the fletchings. One other thing I'll mention about tuning is this bow right here is a 2012 Hoyt Vector 35. And as you can see, there are actually these two, let me step up so you can see this. These two dark things here are basically knock points, metal knock points that have been clamped to the string, and then shrink wrap tubing has been melted around them. So you have them on the top and the bottom limb. this bow is a 2011 Hoyt CRX 35. It's very similar, almost the same bow. They just made a few differences in the design of the riser, but all in all, it's pretty much about the same thing. Slightly different cam. But this bow, when I got it, did not have any kind of weights added to the string. This bow felt, it had more vibration and was a little louder as well. So I simply, the serving didn't come down the string as far as on the other one, so I couldn't do the 2 sets of adding weights to the string. I simply took 4 knock points and I measured the same distance on each one from the edge of the cam, and I clamped them on the string. Doing that, it reduced the vibration in the bow noticeably, and it also made it quieter. So if you've never done anything like that, even just having 1 set, and I only used 4 on each end, even just the 1 set did make a noticeable difference on this particular setup. So that's something you can try as well. Well, I really hope this video has helped you. I hope there's been a few tips in here that will help you fine-tune your Hoyt compound bow to keep it shooting as quietly and smoothly and precisely as possible. If you like what I'm doing with these videos, please help me out by liking them, subscribing, and especially sharing them with as many people as possible. I'd really like to grow my subscriber base. Another great way you can help me out is I've just about finished writing a book on archery, and it's just a short book that I think, there's some tips in there that I think could benefit a lot of people shooting as well as their life in general. There is a little bit of a part of it's focused on archery and a little bit on a little spiritual stuff in there, so it's kind of unique. It's something I don't think you'd find anywhere else with the 2 of those kind of things interwoven. There will be, I'll provide a link to this video when the book is available, and that way you can follow the link to just check it out and hopefully purchase it. It'll be available through Amazon. The ebook version is going to be fairly inexpensive, so please make sure you pick up a copy of that. Thanks again for tuning in. Until next time, take care and God bless.